we're doing this history of the milk industry as well, of course, because now Simon's sold his herd, and that was the last herd to produce milk in Bampton. So it's all part of the history of farming is what we want to do. So ideally we want to get your angle on, because certainly you're up to it. We really want to look at farming from your point of view. To start off with, how does a Kiwi become a farmer here in England? So where were you born to start with? Not New Zealand, I bet.
Wiltshire.
You're joking. No. You're a moonraker, same as us.
That's right. Shrewton, Elston Hill Farm, Shrewton.
I don't know.
My parents came out here in the early 60s.
From where?
From New Zealand.
Right.
Because my uncle's got a farm in Shrewton.
Right.
They owned Elston Hill and Rollestone Manor. And when the uncle remarried, his new wife and dad didn't get on, and dad said, well, I'm going back to New Zealand to live. So they went back to New Zealand to live, but I was born by that stage, because they went back in '69, dad was here 10 years.
So a farming stock then, Rob?
Yeah, always been farming.
Yeah, fair enough.
Dad went back, mum and dad went back, and the family all went back in '69. Dad went back and worked as a shepherd on a farm in New Zealand for 2 years until he bought his farm. Bought his farm, you know, I've always been farming. I went to after school, went to a training farm in New Zealand and trained to be a stockman. I'm not a tractor driver.
So what like the colleges here?
Similar sort of college. Yeah, come out of there. I was there on a 2-year course. It was very, very strict in those days. There was no alcohol allowed. You were allowed to smoke, but definitely no alcohol. You weren't allowed cars, no girls, nothing like that.
Really?
I come out of there.
You certainly made that for itself, didn't you?
I tried to. I come out of there as top cadet, not undertaking tertiary education.
Right.
I then went and worked on a big sheep station in New Zealand of about 3,000 acres with my horse and dogs. Then decided to come back to England for an overseas experience.
Right.
Was here about 8 months. I was here, met my to-be wife, went back to New Zealand, or went to Europe, went to the States, back to New Zealand.
Well, just as a holiday,
just as a holiday.
Yeah.
And then come back to England in 1987. No, 86 I come back, got married in 87, stayed here for another 12, 18 months.
Working on farms?
Working on the same farm that in Northamptonshire. Went back to New Zealand in the end of 87, the wife and I did. Got back into New Zealand, went into the local town to buy a pair of work boots, and the farm manager saw me in there and said, oh Rob, you know, good to see you back, heard you were coming back, nice to see you. And that night he rang me up and said, do you want a job? I said, well, I haven't got any dogs. He said, well, you know, I'll help you into that and we'll see what we can come up with. So I ended up going back and working on the training farm as a farm tutor.
Wow, hey.
So I was there for nearly 4 years. The manager then left and I took over as temporary manager for 3 months until they found out we were looking for a new manager, and I wanted the stock manager's job. But the new manager came in and said, well, you know, you'll have to apply like everyone else. And I applied and didn't get the job, so within 2 weeks I had another job, stock manager somewhere else on a farm out of Dannyburg. And
by stock, this is mainly sheep?
Sheep and beef cattle. The place I went to in Dannyburg was 5,000 acres, very, very steep. It was all horse and dogs. You know, I had 5 horses in work. It was very steep, and we had we were running about 7 to 8,000 sheep, and we had a stud. We were building up a new stud of cattle. So we were building that up, and then I stayed there for a while. then moved on to work on a Angus stud farm back in the Central Hawke's Bay.
This sounded quite completely different to the UK then, because you're saying that a specific breed
Yeah.
is what stud farm is what you would work on, whereas
Well, yeah, but you'll find that most farms in New Zealand will have a breed, whether they're Hereford cross. You know, we used to have Herefords, and on the Smedley, the training farm used to have Herefords and Angus cattle.
yeah.
And you'd put them either to an Angus bull or a Hereford bull.
Yeah.
But the stud farms, they were, you know, purely for stud stock.
Yeah.
And you know, the regime of the cattle out there was anything with a bad foot, it went straight to the abattoirs. You didn't muck about with things like that. This is the only thing I will say about dairy cattle. I'm not a great lover of dairy cattle. Their feet, you know, because you're trying to produce as much out of them as you possibly can. So you're putting a lot of very high protein foods into them, which gives you a lot of feet problems and that sort of thing. So, you know, I've come from a country where, you know, you've got an animal with a bad feet, they go. You don't have anything to do with them.
Was your wife into farming at all, or did you do it together as a twosome, or did she go?
When I first met Anne, she was working for the local hunt master, the Grafton hunt master as a groom, and she stayed with that job until we went to New Zealand, and then of course New Zealand don't have they have hunting, but not as the English had it. And I said, well, you're not going to get a job as a groom in New Zealand, so she retrained with computers and become, I think her first job, she was actually teaching life skills to, I wouldn't say, it would have been children that have gone through schooling, got to 16 to 18 year olds and couldn't read and write still. So we have that problem out in New Zealand as well. So she was teaching them life skills, how to make a CV, how to budget, and those sorts of things. And then the government in their wisdom closed that course. So she actually did a computer course herself on a government scheme, and then got a job working in the local vet clinic. She was the PA for one of the big vet companies in our area, and I think they're now running, that vet clinic is still going quite strong. I think they've got about 14 to 16 vets running from that one practice.
So the pair of you have always been involved with animals?
Animals, yeah. Always.
Going back before we broke off just then, because I'm a dairyman, or was a dairyman, I was talking to Alan yesterday about the dairy herd, and you were saying about the bad feet. Of course, the way we would do it would be looking for bulls, so you're going back to your stud farm type of thing, that would throw, good feet, good legs, etc. But it sounded like in New Zealand you didn't bother with that Sodom.
No, well, I used to have this argument all the time that the company would come out to, because all our bulls were come on a tube, all right, and I used to say to them, what are their feet? And Alan was very good. He was very good. He'd always pick, bulls with a good foot score, but they stand them up on a, you see these cows being shown, and they stand them up on a mound.
Yes,
it's I know all the tricks of the trade as well. We used to show the bulls, the Angus bulls in New Zealand, and the boss and I, we were both big guys. We never ever took the bulls, or we never led the bulls at the sales. We always got the next door neighbour's daughter, who was a small blonde girl, and she would walk around the show ring with the bull, because the boss's philosophy was that while she was walking around the ring with the bull, the farmers would keep bidding on the bull just to keep an eye on the young girl in the ring. So those are all tricks. We would make the bulls look small. So you put a small person with a big bull, and it makes it look even bigger.
See, a British farmer would only look at the bull, he wouldn't look at the bit of crumpet talking it around.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah. So right. So
there's tricks for everything.
Absolutely. That would have making the bull stand on a mound, so they give him that height.
That's right.
they're all, yeah.
You know, when I come here, we were running, there was about 60 odd acres of grass ground. Now, we changed the fencing system, rather than field grazing or the cows grazing over the whole field, we split the fields up into the paddocks, and we paddock grazed and we strip grazed down the paddocks. Now we saved ourselves a lot of, you know, they utilise the grass better. I know dairy cows need more grass than commercial cattle, but you know, they still waste a lot of grass.
Oh, absolutely right. My argument was that a cow would walk into a field and step on 4 lumps of grass, poo on another one, pee on another one. Well, there's 6 lumps of grass gone, they haven't even eaten.
That's right.
And then so towards the end, me and my brother were doing zero grazing to overcome it. But I think we ought to say a little bit about the paddock system, that years ago a farmer would turn his cows out into a field, probably spring grass. He would put an electric fence off and move it so much each day. But then it came this paddock system, that it was smaller paddocks that you let for a day. And is that the system you had?
That's what we started to do here, yes. It meant that the cows would graze down a field or down a paddock, and then you could rest that, and they could go down the next block. And by the time they've got down, you know, 3 cells or 3 paddocks, they could go back onto the other side.
Yeah, it's grown again.
And you know, I think we started ploughing up the grass fields about 3-4 years ago because we had too much grass.
Yeah.
You know, people have said to us, well, why is it that you can grow grass here? Well, one, you know, Simon was prepared to spend money on some fertiliser. You can't grow grass without fertiliser.
Absolutely.
Right, you need it.
Yeah.
We don't go and put excess on because that's just a complete and utter waste of money. We don't want it washed down the drain.
Right, just the right amount to keep it coming.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we've done that.
And often.
That's right. We've done that, and attention to detail. You know, making sure that we're harrowing and that sort of thing, spreading the cow patch round, which some farmers do, some don't.
Yeah.
You know, I had somebody said to me one day, I started harrowing in November, and somebody said to me, but you don't harrow in November. And I said, why not? Is it written anywhere that you don't harrow in November? No, but you don't harrow in November. We normally harrow in the spring. Why? Well, I'm doing it in the autumn because I want that cow muck to be spread.
Right, yeah.
Because if you leave it there all winter, you end up with a dead patch.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have good grass. We've always had good grass here.
So yeah, let's go back a little bit. So you finished New Zealand and you come over here.
Come back and worked I come back to work as a what would you call it? I come back to work with the beef cattle in Northampton,
Right.
on a farm that I'd worked on in the 80s.
Yeah.
Now the guy I'd worked for promised me, you know, a job to come back and work, and there was 2 things I had to do. One was stay for a minimum of 3 years, and 2 was get my HGV to drive the cattle box. So
Yeah.
I did that before I left New Zealand. It cost me £20 to get my full Class 1 licence, which I think is about £800 to £1,000 to
Today.
get. Probably more,
Absolutely.
probably more today. Now I think it's up to over £2,000, and you can only do it in stages.
Really?
You can't just go and sit an HGV one now.
So you did that in New Zealand just in case you couldn't get a job on a farm?
No, I did that. I had the job.
Lined
anyway.
up.
I had the job lined up.
Ah,
It shipped. I'd thought about it. Anne and I had thought about it for about 9 months. It wasn't a decision we made lightly, realising that all my family's still in New Zealand. I don't have any family here. All my family is in New Zealand. I come over here. It was a big decision. My son had been born by then. He was
In New Zealand?
He was born in New Zealand. He would have been 3, I think, when we come back, 2.5, 3.
Right.
So, you know, a big wrench for
everybody.
for his grandparents, you know, who'd seen him, but Anne's parents had never seen Jamie anyway, so that was a big thing. We shipped all our furniture over, and I think it was, not sure if it was April or March, I think it might have been April the 20th. England was hit with BSE?
1996.
That's dead right.
It was indeed. I'll give you the right date.
April of 20.
No, it's March the 26th was when they made the link between, or so say link,
Yeah.
I don't accept it, between BSE and humans.
That's right.
It was March the 26th, 1996.
So it was a month before, well it was a month, the week before that is when we'd shipped our furniture. Now, when you put it on a ship, you can't say, sorry, I want to come back. It's already gone, it's on the ship for 6 weeks. So we come over and I stuck to my agreement, I'd got my HGV, I stayed for a minimum of 3 years and then I come down to manage, I saw this job in the Farmers Weekly, and said, do you want to apply for it? And I said, I'm only really a tractor driver. She says, no you're not, you're more than that. So we applied for this job and it had pigs. I said, but I've never worked with pigs before in my life. And she said, no, you're all right, you can do it. So I said, all right then, so we applied for it. And I got the job, Simon.
So you come here as a farm manager?
Come here as a farm manager.
Taken over from Vic Smith?
From Victor Smith. No relation.
No, I forgot that, yeah. Yeah, Smiths have lived here for a long time.
Smiths have lived here for 40. Victor was here for 29 years. I've been here 12 and a half years, so there's been Smiths living in this house
I'd forgot that.
for 40 odd years.
Yeah, brilliant. So you came here as a farm manager,
As a working farm manager.
Dairy herd, pig herd, and corn.
There, yes.
What was the sort of proportions of land set aside or work set aside for, and of course you're at the income?
Well, when I first come here, we had a tractor driver. Rick was here then, and we had the pigs, and they didn't really do anything at the dairy at all. Alan was left basically to his own. They used to go and might go and do a bit of muck or something like that. Yeah. And if Alan wanted anything, it was a bit of a problem. He would ask and nothing could get done. And Alan was very good. He could do a lot on his own.
Right.
And the pigs used to take up a lot of time.
How big was the herd? Because I remember the stench when he used to clean out and they would go through that.
There used to be, I think at one stage we had up to 1,200 pigs here.
Whoa, was it as big as that?
It was, but they weren't, that was all fattening. There was no sows here when I come, that was all fattening. The pigs were all bought in at whatever, 8 weeks or whatever they were, or 4 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever, it'd be 8 weeks.
It was 8 weeks.
They were all bought from the Simon's other farm in Devizes.
Ah, right. It wasn't an agency then.
No.
There was Bibby's used to run an agency that you could belong to it, because I was producing youngsters, Landrace, had to be Landrace, for the Bibby market, and they would guarantee me a price, but I had to use, if I remember right, it was hybrids. But you had to work with that system. But you're saying it's totally independent.
Ours was independent. We all our piglets were all bought from the other farm.
Right.
When I first come here, Simon, and we started working with the pigs, we used to clean things up, and I spent hours and hours with a shovel and a brush cleaning things up. And Simon, one day said to me, he said, your mortality rate on the pigs is very, very high. And yes, I did humanely kill pigs that were not of a good standard, and we got rid of them. We disposed of them. We were allowed to, in those days, still allowed to burn. So we used to incinerate them, but later on we weren't allowed to. They all had to go as dead stock and be taken away because of the legislation changing. So we did that, and then. Simon was on about the mortality rate, and I just thought, well, your first loss is your cheapest loss.
That's my dad used to say.
And about a month before the pig unit actually closed, Simon, in another one of his conversations with me, had said, well, I thought my last pigman was good, but he says you've outdone it, because we were sending off probably 90 98, 99% of the pigs that are going off the farm were going as Q grades, which is the top
yeah.
grade.
Yeah.
And all it was, and it's the same with any animal, whether it be a dairy cow or a pig or a sheep or a chicken, even a dog or a cat. All it is just down to good animal husbandry. And that's where my original grounding come from. The tractor driving has been a sideline. I learned to drive a tractor from the age of 12. I was baling hay with an old conventional baler up and down the road. I used to go with a little Fergie tractor and conventional baler at the age of 12. But the old Bill didn't seem to mind too much. But they totally different now.
Actually, aged 8, I drove my first Fortson Major, the E27N, from down the lane there, along here and into the farm at aged 8.
Yeah, well, my lad was the same. Jamie drove the old Leyland pig tractor that used to be here. He drove that. He must have been about 6. It was the old Leyland.
It didn't do any harm at all.
It didn't. He had to stand up to reach the pedals, but the tractor had no brakes, and his first time on it, he crashed it it didn't do any harm. It just went in and hit the front of the building, because we said to him, "Oh, you need to put the hydraulics down for the scraper to use as brakes." Those are the sorts of things. But he learned. He's now I trust him with the big tractor we got out there. £70,000 worth of tractor. Get on that and drive it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a lot older now, but
yeah, well, that's it. I also think it's so much more complicated. But kids did, as youngsters, learn.
Well, they do.
At a very early age.
Yeah,
brilliant.
But you'll find that most farm children will apply for a tractor licence, which is legal at the age of 16.
Yeah.
And that actually helps them when it comes to the insurance. Because when it comes to getting your no claims bonuses, you end up with an extra year's driving with no claims.
That's right, yeah, of course you did, yeah, I thought of that.
So at the age of 19, he's got 3 years no claims bonuses.
Yeah. But see, there's another aspect of farming that is a great shame. We all, my era, we started working on the farm at a very, very early age, and you learned health and safety. You learnt the proper way, i.e., you don't put your finger in. I mean, the old-fashioned.
Yeah.
I was working on this farm in the 1940s, threading the needles. The old-fashioned baler, stationary baler, with the wire tied. They'd put the needle in and thread 2 wires through, and then I'd be on the other side.
Because they're coming from the side.
That's it. Then you thread them back. Actually, so I was working for Mr. Collins back in the 1940s, and it did me no harm. You had all these enormous belts on the thrashing machine, uncovered, but you learnt you don't put your finger in there, you don't do this.
Because it's going to hurt.
Because it's going to hurt, that's right. And so you learnt to look after yourself from religion, and that's all disappearing. Like, what amazed me is you just said that you had your son driving at an early age on a tractor, like I did, up the road. And before we started this interview, me and you were talking out there, and you are so full of health and safety and what you can do, like burning and your rubbish and all the rest of it. You seem as though you love it. You're a fan of all these EEC rules. Tell me we are not, Rob.
I hate them, but we have to have them.
Why do you have to have them? Because you want them? You
because
agree with the EEC?
No, I don't. I don't agree with it at all. Because if we don't have it, you won't get your single farm payment. If you don't apply by all their rules, you won't get your single farm payment.
That's what I want to hear you say.
All right?
Would you explain what a single farm payment is?
Well, that's a big one, Jan. It's rules and regulations.
I've got to be careful because I'm going to look at you now because the single farm payment. They say that the subsidies have all gone. All right. Basically, all they've done is change the name of it. We are still getting money from the government to grow our crops, because if we didn't, we couldn't afford to do it.
Yeah.
All right, we couldn't afford to buy the kit we buy. We don't go out and buy new kit. We've got, our kit's a lot flashier than your Collins, you know. But he's got his JCB. His JCB's newer than mine, and you know, he's got his John Deere tractors. His John Deere tractors do what he wants them to do.
That's right.
All right, but he's got to realise that what we're doing on this farm here, I want a tractor that we get on, and I'll go and plough 25, 30 acres a day.
Yeah.
Not a problem. I'll burn 600 litres of diesel.
In a day?
I can burn, well, if I was on the power harrow, if that was on the power harrow, I could burn 600 litres of diesel a day. Easy.
How much is that in?
I think diesel now is about 64 pence a litre.
That is unbelievable. My brother Terry, one of the fields that I think you probably farm, if you go down past the old milking parlour, down that lane,
Shiny.
straight down and straight over it.
Shiny.
Right.
It was split into 4.
Right, okay. There was 10 acres there that my brother ploughed 10 acres, 10 hours on 10 gallons. You couldn't do that there. You plough it a lot quicker, but there's no way on earth you would do it as cheap as that.
I don't know.
45 litres. He ploughed 10 acres with 45 litres. You'd have a job to do that today.
I'd actually beg to differ on that one. Yeah, but how deep was he ploughing?
Oh, well, Shani, 6 inches was ample.
Yeah, it was, yeah. But you've got to realise that big tractor will still plough. You can't, just because you get good ploughing, doesn't mean you can go any faster. You know, I could plough through that gravel ground in Shani at 9-10 kilometres an hour, for argument's sake, and I can come up to the big Glebe field, which is solid clay, and I can still pull that at 9 and 10k.
Yeah.
But I'll burn a little bit more diesel.
Yeah.
You know, it's just. But I'll still plough. You know, if you get the right sort of field, I can plough anything. I can plough. You know, I'm just saying 30 acres a day.
It's a hell of a whack, you know, when you think about
but it's, you know, that's why that tractor's so flash inside, because you've got to, that becomes my house.
Yeah.
That becomes my house
Yeah.
for, you know, I might get in there at 7:30 in the morning, get out at lunchtime to have a bite to eat. I know that's against the working directive of you're supposed to have a
4.5 hours and 45 minutes rest.
Well, I think it's even less than that. I think you're supposed to get out every couple of hours or every hour and walk around or do something. You know, the days when I used to smoke, I used to put the plough on the ground and drop the plough on the ground and drive along and hop out the tractor, stand on the step and have a cigarette. When you got to the other end, you'd finished your cigarette, you hop back in the tractor and away you go. So
My dad made us so busy we even had a piddle going along. So.
Well, we went to, not as bad as that. I would get it on the carpet and the tractor.
Oh, you got carpets as well as refrigerators.
I put the carpet.
Oh, you are sport, you lot. They're the softest.
Yeah, but you see, you've got to realise that how many people, when you worked on this farm in the 1940s, how many people worked?
Oh, loads and loads.
How many?
I would say probably 10.
10 of you worked on this farm, and it wasn't as big as it is now.
No.
All right, so there's now, it's 600 acres, this farm, and there's one person works on this farm. Right, I do get people to come in and help on the odd occasion. You know, we have, like I've got people here today, but we're working with a digger, which the farmer doesn't own. You know, it's had to hire that in, and I've hired in an extra staff member to help as well.
Can we go into that area, because there was a period of time, and I wrote about it in the Beeb, and I did think it was probably a way forward for farmers because machinery became so expensive. There was a period of time when you, Colin, and Barlow Vaughan worked together to do the silaging.
That's right.
And that worked absolutely brilliant. I know there has to be a lot of trust and respect for
and I started that.
It was you that started that.
I started that.
I'm such a firm believer in that's the way it should have gone forward.
It should have. It should. I got asked a while ago, would I take on the spraying of another farmer's ground? I could use his sprayer, and I spray his ground, and then we could come back and spray our ground as well. And I thought about it and spoke to Simon about it, and we thought, well, because of the windows for spraying are very, very small. I think on an average year, if you were doing everything to the letter, I think they recorded about 5 years ago. They recorded there was 8 perfect spraying days in a year.
Really?
Right?
Would you explain what you look for in a perfect spraying day?
You do need a breeze. All right, you do need a certain amount of breeze. It can't be too hot, it can't be too cold, it can't be, pouring with rain. So, all those sorts of things, you need a gentle breeze. I'm not saying 15, 16 mile an hour winds or anything like that, but you need a gentle breeze to get the sprays to work, to get them to go down. You can stop all your drift by using low volume bubble jets. You can use, cut your forward speed down, you can cut your pressures down and all this sort of thing. You can do everything you can to eliminate drift, but you still need a certain amount of wind to make the chemicals work, to get them, because you're using such a fine spray, you need a certain amount to get round all the plants. I was listening this morning on a radio program this morning on the radio, and it said that England can grow 12 tonne to the hectare crops quite easily in this country, which is what we need to be doing to make food sustainable in this country. But because of all the pests that come in, and pests and viral things and that sort of thing, and that we have to go and spray for, and they've damaged the crop, realistically the British farmer is only getting 8 tonnes to the hectare. That's a good crop. Mm-hmm. Now, this ground here, we don't always get that. This year we definitely won't get it because of the dry weather. We've got wheat we've got a couple of fields of wheat, or parts of fields of wheat, that have been hit severely with a drought, which it's died on its feet basically. Not the whole field, but parts of it. We would probably, the yield even over everything, we could be down. We're going to have the same costs because we still had to use the same fertiliser, we still had to use the same amount of seed, we still had to use the same chemicals and those sorts of things that we use, but we could be down, our incomes could be down by 25%.
So, still going back, did you, the offer of doing that farmer spraying, did you do it?
No.
Because of this
because
window,
of the small window,
you have to do
I
your
don't.
own.
Yeah, whose do you do first?
That's right.
Whose do you do first?
You do
You've
your
got
own.
Yeah, but when it was the other farmer's machine, you're probably obliged to go and do his first.
So this is one of the problems. They come like combines. They're more than the cost of a house.
The average to get a decent combine, you're probably looking at about 225,000 for a machine. If we were to spend £225,000 on a combine now, we would use it for 8 days of the year. Because the capacity of them, we could use it. We could combine this whole farm, this 500 acres of arable ground, in about 8 days.
So why don't you do contractors then?
Basically where we are, because the combine comes from the other farm, but we just can't help it. The other farm's 50 miles away, and it's 50 mile away.
Yeah.
So, it is. Contractors, I hate contractors, because everyone wants a contractor on the same day.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to be self-sufficient. Right, we could go and buy a good second-hand combine that would probably be 10 years old, and it would still cost us 55,000.
Would it really? But it would do the job.
It would do the job, and it would. But then I'd have to employ another staff member to drive the tractor and trailer.
Yeah.
Whereas the situation we have here, my boss won't buy me a combine for that, because, and I understand that we can't afford it, but it is frustrating when your crops do start to deteriorate in the field and there's nothing you can do about it. Your whole life is dependent on the weather.
Yeah.
All right. So when they come up with a combine. They come up with a tractor and a trailer, and they come here and they can combine the rate. They could just about do that. Combine will do probably 100 acres a day of rate. If you really wanted to push it, they could do 100 acres a day. On the wheat, we probably average, because we don't have to push it. We know we're going to do it over 3 days, or used to do it over 3 days. We just do it over the 3 days, and you do, I don't know, 60, 70 acres a day.
The crazy thing about it, Rob, this is all about farming through the years, that, alright, I said there are probably 10 people working here, but the harvest was done just the same. In 1952, my dad bought one of the first combines to come in this area. Barlow Vaughan had the first combine in this area.
I think he sold it the
other day. John Chicken. There's a Massey Harris, and when he told me that there was a Massey Fergie.
Well, it wasn't Massey Fergie, 760.
So the dad had this cast combine that would also convert to do stationary thrashing. It was one with a David Brown engine up on the top, and it was a trailer one, and it would cut like a binder. It would cut it, go in through the drum that way, so the straw wasn't mangled, and the straw was thatching straw when it came. So we were talking about that era, and Terry and I went out contract work. Did most of the farmers around here did their combining, and yeah, we were working 10 hours a day.
Yes, but you two went out and did the contracting work, and the other 8 people you said that worked on the farm carried on and did the farm work. Now, if
they did the binder.
Well, if you went out and did the combining or whatever,
right, yeah.
and the other 8 people stayed on this farm to do the work.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm actually talking about, we were farming separate then, but
yeah,
I'm still getting your
but if I had a combine here, a second-hand combine that we paid 45,000 for, or 55,000 for, or whatever, and we bought that combine and we did our own, and then I went off to do somebody else's, nothing happens on this farm.
Why?
Because there's nobody here to do it. I can't drive the combine.
No, I see what you mean. Yeah,
right.
Because you're a one-man
outfit. It's a one-man farm, and that's where it's gone.
Yeah.
When you had 10 people,
all
right, if somebody had a holiday,
there
was always somebody else did their job.
Yeah.
Now, if I have a holiday now, the whole farm comes to a standstill.
Right, let me throw an equation at you. All right, 250,000. What's a farm worker's wage these days? 15,000. A farm worker's wage.
You're looking at. I'm not sure, but I think for a grade 2 farm worker, which is somebody that can drive a tractor unsupervised, I think it works out at about £6.84 an hour.
240 a week.
And then they get an overtime rate of about £8 something an hour.
Where I'm coming from, look at the number of men you could employ without thinking combines costing you.
And that's
so. Is it progress?
Yes and no, because the weather now is probably it's unpredictable.
It was then.
Yeah, but you weren't combining the same area. How many acres were you combining per year?
Well, nothing like that. Not from a combine cost. I think the combine cost us £1,000 in.
Yeah, and what was the wages?
The wages £5 a week.
Yeah, well, the average wage now is probably £240, £250 a week.
Yeah,
so but a lot of things are comparable. The farm wages haven't gone up. The farm wages.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from, Rob. Where I'm coming from is something's going terribly wrong that people employed on the farm is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, enormous machines, unemployment in the country.
But you can't get anyone to come and work for £6.40. You can't get anyone to come and work for £6.84 an hour. Nobody wants to bloody do it.
Yeah, and living in a rural
Right?
area.
They're quite happy to go and labour on a building site and get £10 an hour.
Yeah.
You try and find, you go and say to somebody, they'll get more on the dole.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
People don't want hard physical work anymore.
Mm.
Everyone.
It's just that what was getting to me was all that money for a combine. It's only doing that short period of time when you could employ people and still get the work done. You know.
Well,
I'm a romantic.
No, you might be romantic, but nobody wants to work in the farming industry. It's a dying industry, but we still need it. We need to produce it. The comment on the radio today about this programme I was listening to, that we need to be producing 50% more food to keep this country going, and that's England alone.
Do you think that England could be self-sufficient on its main bread, vegetables, its main ingredients? I know your fruits and that.
If people went back to eating seasonal foods, but people want strawberries 365 days of the year. They want apples 365 days of the year. How many people do you know go to store apples?
Yeah, that's right.
Now there's apple trees that are probably still on this farm that were here when you worked here, which every year drop their apples on the ground because nobody wants to come and get them.
Yeah.
There was a chap last year come and asked me, could he have the apples to make some cider? I said, you help yourself.
Yeah.
Now those apple trees, there's one out the back of the piggery, there's one up towards the dairy, there's a couple up the road, and they just drop their apples on the floor every year.
Yeah. We have to a degree become a very wasteful nation. You don't get this. I go around giving talks about growing up in Bampton. I'm usually talking to people probably older than me even, and you say to them about Boyston's pudding. Like, oh yeah, you'll always get 3 or 4.
Yeah, well, I didn't get that because I don't know what a Boyston pudding is.
The colostrum, when a cow it's given colostrum the first 4 days that you had to throw away, we could give to the people of Bampton and they loved it. When you got a cow calving done, or to Dad Reg, can we have some of the Boystons? And you bake it, you just come and put it in a tin, bake it, put some cinnamon over the top, bake it, and that was very similar to an egg custard. You can't do it now. The law doesn't allow.
We weren't allowed to, even the raw milk from the dairy. We weren't allowed. You're not allowed to sell it. It has to be. You can't give it away, or it all has to go to a processing plant. The days of raw milk have gone. They went years ago.
When my wife was doing bed and breakfast, and I had a dairy herd, the law at one time, I could go to my bulk tank, lift the lid, take the cream off the top in the morning, first before I started milking, take the cream off the top and put in a jug, press the button to agitate it, and take a jug of milk out. The cream, because that was a food, did not need licensing. The milk did. It came out of the same tank, it was the same product, but one did not need a license, the other one did. And we had to put in the bedrooms, the milk on this establishment has not been pasteurised. It's raw milk and it's not been pasteurised. Can we go back to the possibility? You say you heard a programme this morning of where people were saying we should grow more food. This country needs to grow more food.
We need.
Do you ever think the EC will let us?
Well, something's got to happen because England, the population's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And right, they want us to grow more food, but they also want us to have more and this is one thing I do agree with, is we need to be looking after our wildlife better. You know, the farmers for years they've had the bad press for the pesticides and all that, the insecticides they've used have killed all the wildlife. But how many predator birds do we see now? There's a lot. You know, we're going into the putting down pollen and nectar mixes and wild bird mixes and all that sort of thing. We're going to have different plots around the farm. There's some big areas going into these pollen and nectar pieces. Righto, that's a little corner of a field which is hard to get the big machine into. But you know, that's the only reason we'll do it. Is because you know you can't get a 24-metre sprayer into a 10-foot triangle. It just the maths doesn't work, does it?
No.
So you can't do it. So we might as well put a pollen and nectar mix in there for the wild birds, and you know I've seen.
So when you do that, it's not done because you sell the shooting right, or do you sell the shooting right?
No, not allowed to shoot. Not allowed to. It's not anything to do with the shoot.
Right.
It's not for shooting. It's for wildlife.
Right.
All right. It's for the pollen and the nectars for the birds and the bees, and for insects and that sort of thing. It's got nothing to do with the shoot. Although we do have a syndicate shoot on the farm, that is totally separate. And it's been proven by a neighbour of ours across the river that everything can run together. He's got RSPB, I've got a field on his farm. We go through and we shoot the pheasants on the farm. He's got all these wild flowers and that sort of thing. He's got willow coppice and all that sort of carry on. Everything can work together. Farmers aren't going to ruin the countryside, because if they poison it, they're not going to grow anything.
And they're going to live. That's right.
And although they say, "Oh, Joe Bloggs owns that farm," nobody ever owns the farm. We're only there
tenants
as tenants for our lifetime.
Yeah, you're so
right. The land is owned by whoever or whatever. Nobody owns.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's a house in town. We're only there for a short time.
But basically it's British, and it will always be British.
Yeah.
It'll be part of Great Britain, and so we are only borrowing it for the period of time that we have paid money to.
Yeah, there is things that have happened over the years. There is things that have happened that have been, you know, wrong, and there's been changes made, and some of the changes have been good, and some of the changes have been bad.
So this is so important, Robert. John Wilmer, fantastic bloke to talk to about it, and it's lovely to hear somebody as young as you basically saying the same thing. You know, there's so much out there that we can live off and do, and yet protect our heritage. I had a chap come in and help me one day. We were doing some work for along a riverbank. And we were there, we were cutting all the old hedges and that sort of thing down, and we were there with the chainsaw and the tractor were running, and plop into the water, and it was an otter. And we spent 10 minutes watching we turned the chainsaw off, turned the tractor off, and we spent 10 minutes stood on the riverbank watching the otter fish the river.
What a joy.
And you know, people say that we've ruined the environment. What's ruining our environment is all the houses they're building. Because all the water and all the houses that they build at Swindon, all that water comes this way, and every time that river floods, it ruins our river, because it takes all our fish population away.
When I was a kid, the swimming places for us kids, when I was living here, it was the old brook that runs down the fields down there. It was where there were some big holes you went out to swim. One of the best places was Highbridge, Old Man's Bridge.
Old Man's Bridge.
Right? There's just up from there was a nice little bay, and we used to go there. And the water was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But now I'm told the water when it gets there, because of Swindon, etc., has been in and out of 5 different people by the time it gets there. So there is a lot more pollution now. I know the water's been cleaned and all the rest of it, but it is a shame that part of our nature, because of the high inhabitant
Well, it's getting worse. But you've got to realise that, you know, I shouldn't be picking on Swindon, but most of your towns were that size years ago. You know, the size of, you know, the fist or something like that. And all that water, you know, carried off, and it went all, you know, drained down drains or whatever, and it went down the River Thames. All right, and the River Thames was 3 inches wide. Okay, now you've doubled the size of the towns.
Yeah.
All right, and it's the size of 2 fists.
Yeah.
But because there's been no management of the rivers, the River Thames, right, it might be 3 inches wide, but it's only 1 inch deep now, as opposed to it used to be 2 inches deep. So the water flow has got to take twice the amount of water, but it's got less flow.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Environment Agency aren't, you know, there's been cuts and everything, and the Environment Agency aren't able to do the work that, you know, you talk to the men on the ground, all right, they know what needs to be done, but it's not getting done.
Yeah.
Because there's not the money there, there's not, you know, do you tax people more? No.
The number of gangs that were employed by Thames Water or Environment Agency years ago was much higher.
I think we have one now of about one gang of 4 men to do the whole of Oxfordshire.
Mad. And yet when I was a kid, each summer you would get a dredger doing one of the brooks. One of the, either the two, you got the 2 brooks or the River Thames. And you get absolutely nothing. You've involved, I know, as wearing your councillor hat, you've had a lot to do with the flooding in Bampton, and so many people blame the farmers.
No,
they blame them. They can,
and I'm going to blame the government for their cuts, because if the Environment Agency aren't going to dig the ditches or whatever, we after 2007 we did 5 kilometres of ditching, and when we took the last bit out of our ditch, the water flowed up the ditch.
Yeah.
So that was a waste. That was a waste of 5 kilometres of ditching. Yeah. So what was the point?
But Rob, I'm fairly sure you would tell me if I am right, that when I was a kid and you barged your ditches, you got in there with a hook and a crook and you cut down both sides. But the law says no, you can only do one side at a time.
Well, the hedges and that, it's hedges more than ditches. I try and keep all my ditches trimmed. I do try. It costs.
And they will let you. Yeah, I've caught you. I've caught you.
I did say that we try and do things 110%, right? I did say try.
Right. Now let me tell you something. We're in my twinning. I have a lot to do with twinning between Oxford City and its twin cities, which is Perm in Russia, Leiden in Holland, Grenoble in France, and Bonn in Germany, and Leon in Nicaragua. Counting Leon out. Those are the 4. We had, after that flooding of 2007, we had a big seminar in Oxford Town Hall with all the experts from all them countries, being spoken to by our own environment agencies, and that was brought up, the business about the hedging and the ditching, and the Russians and the Germans thought we were joking. They honestly could not believe that this country said that you could only barge one side, that you were limited on what you could do because of the wildlife. Whereas the Germans and the Russians said, well, that's idiotic, you're flooding your towns and you're not doing your ditches because of the wildlife. That's mad.
Well, they think it's the same as everything. People think more of wildlife than they do of humans. All right. If you've got a sick animal, I shouldn't perhaps say this, but if you've got a sick animal, you put them down.
Absolutely.
If you've got a sick human, we keep them alive.
Yeah.
I know that there's always heartache. There's heartache in everything. You know, I remember when I was in New Zealand. One of my best sheepdogs was my best dog I'd had, and she was a really good dog. And I went out one day, and she'd had a lot of problems with. She'd been stood on by the horse. She'd bust her leg, she'd done this, you know, a working dog's life's really hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, she'd had problems and so on. And I went out one morning and here she was, lying basically lifeless in a kennel.
Yeah.
We were over half an hour's drive to the nearest vet. She wouldn't have survived it, and I had to go out and shoot that dog because it wasn't fair to put that to keep that animal going again.
Yeah.
You know, it may have survived the trip to town, but you've got to realise that you've got to cut your losses somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, believe it or not, this morning I've had to put one of my dogs down. I just took him to the vet and I had to put it down.
Oh,
So, you know,
bad.
I can relate to it. But the point is, going on to this animal thing, and indeed we were discussing this with Alan yesterday, badgers and TB.
Oh, don't get me started.
Well,
Don't get me started.
But the public, there was a survey done in one of the newspapers yesterday that said that the 60% of the public would sooner see the badgers live and the dairy herd be put down. Where's the common
I think
sense
you'll
in that?
find that it was actually 70%.
Was it as high as that, was it?
Yeah. I could probably pull that up on that computer there for you. Because,
Absolute madness.
because they don't understand. I've got a friend that used to go out clay shooting on a Sunday morning just for a bit of a laugh, all right? You know, we'd go out, there was a group of us and we'd go out clay shooting. Now this guy, he travelled the world. His dad was in the RAF and he was an engineer. And this lad who lives in the village had travelled the world. He works as a technician for a lorry company, and he come down here to start clay shooting. You know, we got him interested in shooting and that sort of thing. And he come down and met me and that sort of thing. And he says to me now, he says, I understand what happens on a farm. He said, I didn't have a clue. And this is where I think that these farming Sunday that happens every year on about the 11th of June, I think I'd like to do it here, but we've got an old farm and sometimes it's not kept. I keep it clean, but it's old buildings and I don't want the people to come around and look at that old fallen down building, and that's what has put me off doing it. But I'd love to do that, to make more of the public aware, because that's the biggest problem. The public are not aware of what is happening in the farming industry. They've got no idea.
Yeah.
It's not just farming, it's even gardening. I mean, Roy Shergold will tell you that he'd pulled some beautiful carrots up for Simon's dad with a garden at Greyshot. And they had visitors and they had beautiful carrots. And he said, oh, Roy, they're lovely. Where did you get those from? And he didn't answer that question. He said, would you like some? And she said, yes, where did you get them from? He said, well, in the garden. She said, what, you mean they've been in soil? Oh, I couldn't have carrots that have been in soil.
There was a
She doesn't
program.
even know that they grow in the ground.
Program last night on the TV called "Kill It, Cut It, Use It" on BBC Three, and they took 3 girls from London that loved wearing Ugg boots. What do you call them?
Yeah.
All right. Now they took those 3 girls and they went to an abattoirs in Devon. And they went from start to finish. These girls did, and I take my hat off to them. They didn't throw up. They didn't go ugh, yuck, you know, ooh, and turn away. They stood there and they watched. They watched the sheep. They didn't actually see it stunned, but they saw it being stuck. They saw it hang up. They saw the skin come off it. They saw it being gutted. They then went with that skin to the tannery and watched it being salted and dyed and they put it over a buffing machine to make the leather soft. Then they went off and they saw the shoes being made. Now, I think by the time that the skin had come off the sheep, he sold it to the tanner for £6. The tanner then sold it to the shoe,
The leather puro one.
the manufacturer, and he sold it for £26. And the girls bought the end product for £225.
Yeah.
So, who's making the money?
Yeah.
It's
He's
like
a farmer.
it's like the milk. You go and buy a 2 litre container of milk. It is 98 pence for 2 litres. We were selling our milk. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying this. Alan will probably have told you yesterday or not. Did he say it was 26p a litre?
No, we didn't go into price.
But I'm pretty sure it was 26p a litre. Now we paid, or the farm paid, for the transport we paid all the costs to produce that milk. We then also paid for the transport from the farm to the processing plant. For 26p we got.
Yeah.
All right. So then that milk is processed, put into your plastic 2 litre container,
Yeah.
which are pence.
Yeah.
Put a sticky label on it with a British flag on it,
Yeah.
with a thing on it that's telling you how much fat in it and how much this and that's in it and what's not in it and what should be in it. All right. And then they stick it on the shelf at 98p in our local shop.
Yeah.
Now, who's making
The big money.
the big money? Is it the processor? Is it the supermarket or whatever? Who's making that? Who's making it? They've got no cost. They've got no.
And the public don't know that.
No, but they've got no. They just get the milk. They've got none of the worry.
Yeah.
You know, if they can't get the milk from that company, they go there and get it. If we run short of grass, we can't say, well,
Go and buy some.
we can't. We've got no grass,
Yeah.
so we have to buy in
Yeah.
grass, and we have to buy in concentrates.
Yeah.
And usually, if we haven't got grass, the neighbours haven't got grass. So then it puts the cost of buying your straights up even higher.
But the milk will stay at the same price.
The milk will stay at the same price.
I know when the meat industry was going through a bad time, some farmer had sold some sheep, and I'm pretty sure it was in Swindon Market, and it was Sainsbury's that bought it. And they paid something like £45 an animal. And he was so incensed by it, he went into Sainsbury's and had a look, and joints of meat was a hell of a price. So he phoned them up and he said, would your butcher department cut me up a whole lamb? How much would you charge for a whole lamb? And it was 240 quid. He said, well, I don't know how can you give me 40 quid in the market and charge 240 quid when all that's been done has been killed. You know, and the public are not aware
They're not.
of that. Talking to Alan yesterday, the thing that I did and firmly believed in when I was farming was that local school children, that they should know where food comes from.
Wouldn't be allowed now.
You're joking.
Health and safety wouldn't allow it.
Really? The kids couldn't go into my milking parlour and see the cows being milked?
Probably not now. You look at the problem that these farm petting farms have, the legislation that they have to go through, and the rigmarole. We wouldn't have the right hand basin to wash their hands, and it wouldn't be the right depth for something stupid.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have the right hand cream or the right soap for them to wash their hands afterwards. So we wouldn't be allowed to do it.
Well, now you know, Rob, why when I first met you today, I saw you getting out of that lovely new tractor, wearing a hard hat and earmuffs.
I had been using a chainsaw. That's why I couldn't hear the phone ring.
When you were in a safety cab, the decibels inside that cab are down to about 70 something. I laughed. I do apologise for this. Probably easy regulations.
No, do you know why I had that hard hat?
Why you say just any
No, do you know why?
Go
Yeah,
on.
I've been using a chainsaw, and two, I just come back from the JR hospital yesterday from getting a piece of steel out my eye.
Oh, I'll take it back then.
All right, so that's why I thought face mask, ear defenders. I don't want to get into trouble.
Rob, it really has been brilliant because we've interviewed all sorts of different people and had a chat. I mean, Tommy Garrett, as I said earlier on, was absolutely brilliant because he took us right back to the 1930s when he was managing a farm just round the corner. There was a bloke, Ernie Parker, who used to milk cows around that corner there. And so he put it from that side. You brought us right up to date with all the legislation and the pain in the backside stuff and this small province, and of course the most dangerous thing when I was a kid, you went onto any farm, anywhere in Bampton, and there would be people there. When we come here this morning, not a soul.
There was not.
Because you're a one-man outfit, and I think it's horrendously dangerous what you're doing.
It is. My wife's just done a first aid course, and in that, the chap that ran that course said that the biggest percentage of all farm-related accidents happen between 10:30 in the morning and 11 o'clock in the morning.
Really?
Yes, because you've got up early, you've gone off and done your. When I say right, you've gone to work at 7:30. I shouldn't say early. They've gone off. We didn't get up. We don't get. Very rarely, I start at 5 or 4 o'clock in the morning. A month ago I started at 4 o'clock in the morning. I went spraying because the weather was right. So we do start early. The perception of the farmer up with the birds and all that sort of thing. That has possibly gone. You know, because we've got the big tractor, we can go out, and from 7:30 till 6 or 7 o'clock at night. I probably work later at night than start earlier in the morning.
You'd have done more in a day than we would have done in a week.
Probably.
Yeah.
Because we've got the machinery to do it. All right. We're going to cover we'll burn more diesel, but we're going to cover the ground. We will cover the ground.
Yeah.
All right. But the reason is that we're going back to why that there's more accidents they're usually between 10:30 and 11 o'clock in the morning, because the farmer's got up, he's had his breakfast and he's had his cup of coffee and he's gone out, and because he's got so much to do, because there's only one of them to do it now, all right, and he's on his own, he hasn't stopped for that break.
Right.
So you do need to stop for a break.
Yeah.
And that's why, because their sugar levels will get down.
Yeah.
All right, and they think we're invincible. We all think we're invincible, but we're not.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why they've said, that's why they reckon there's a lot of accidents happening between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, because your sugar levels are low. And we also probably, because we take risks.
Yeah, yeah.
And which we shouldn't.
Well, the government brings out all these rules and regulations, and I remember when power take-off guards came out first, before you started power take-off, shafted, telescoping, no problem. Then they brought these guards that had to fit over which telescoped.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm with my muck spreader, and I'm unhitching my muck spreader down the fields. And I got on the power take-off shaft, pressed the 2 buttons, pulled it back, and the safety cover telescoped and pinched my skin between the 2 shafts.
Shouldn't have your overalls on.
Yeah, but then it caught me blinking, go! And I couldn't get out. I pulled it back and jammed, nobody about, and then we're trying to push with my foot, trying to get it go back again. So I don't go a lot on the modern safety rules.
They're there for a reason. They are there for a reason, and yes, I do agree with some of them.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes that things are gone
Well over the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to sum up, Rob, you really have brought us up to the modern era, showed us what a pain in the backside all the rules and regulations are that are coming from EEC, which you said just now, you agree with some of them, some of them you don't. But it does sound, you still sound as though farming has got a lot of future.
Well, it has. What a fantastic way of life. Like I said, I spoke before about being down there with the farm and trimming the hedge and that sort of thing, and an otter goes past. Yeah. You're ploughing the fields and you've got a sparrow hook 10 feet off the tractor mudguard. We come back the other night, the barn owl sitting on a fence post. Now, there used to be a barn owl. I haven't seen it of late, but it's usually called as the fields out here, and it's the red kites that have come back into the air, the number of buzzards. But all those birds, or a lot of those birds, also affect the wildlife that we have got here. Your British songbirds and those sorts of things. They've declined because those birds go and destroy ground nesting birds. Yeah. So it's not just the farmers that have ruined it, or the farmers are getting the blame for doing it. It's not. Yeah. There is other factors that people don't understand. Yeah. TB. You know, oh, look at Bambi run across the field. Bambi carries TB as well.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
the badger. You know, here comes, what's it, Boris the Badger or whatever it was. You know, doesn't he look nice? Yeah. Joe Bloggs thinks he's nice until he does £30,000 worth of damage to his BMW car because it's running across the road.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of badgers.
Yeah.
I've heard comments that, oh yeah, the only badgers you see on the roadside that are dead, if you really did a post-mortem on them, you'll find a slug in them.
Yeah, that's what somebody said to me. And they've been carried out, but I don't.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, so would I. Yeah.
I don't, anyone that I talk to in the farming industry have all said, if we were to, you'd have to ring fence or do something to stop the badgers, but they'd just go under. But,
Yeah.
you know, if you've got badgers on your farm and you've got rid of them, you may open it up to infected badgers to come in. Because but
So
while
what's your answer then?
I don't know. You could always have the same policy what New Zealand did, and that was to combat the TB in New Zealand. They just went out, and the possum was the biggest. The possum and the wild deer are one of the biggest things, and they went out there, and the possum is a pest. All right, is a pest. The wild deer are a pest because they're ruining the New Zealand habitat, and they just went out and they used 1080.
That's great.
All right, and that's the only way. And I'm not saying go out and kill every badger. No way. I love to see the badgers.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to see everything dead and just be. You know, it was sad. It was sad when the dairy closed. It was eerie. It was quiet. There wasn't the moo in the shed or the calf. You know, calling. You know, but you go up there, and the cows were still there. And I started to pull down some of the fences because they weren't going to be used, and you know, all they were going to do was grow stinging nettles around them, and I wanted to keep it topped and nice and tidy. I pulled the fences up, and I said to Alan one day, "This feels cold up here now." You know, and when the cows are gone, there's no life. It's gone. It's another.
So do you think the way forward for cattle would be your feedlots, sort of 1,000 cows all in one protected area so no badger can get there? They're all inside.
People say, "Oh, shouldn't allow it. They're going to have a big animal welfare problem," but a farmer is not going to let his animals suffer.
Absolutely no way. No.
It doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's you've got 100 milking cows or you've got 1,000 milking cows. They're all going to be treated exactly the same.
Yeah.
If you're going to vaccinate them for leptospirosis or something like that, you're going to vaccinate your 100 cows. All you're going to do is buy 1,000 times more vaccine. You're not going to say, "Oh, well, that one doesn't look right. That one looks right. I won't do that one."
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll save myself some money. It's like fertiliser. They say that we go and chuck the fertiliser and let it all run off down the ditches. How many farmers do you know want to pour money down a drain? They've never got any money.
Right. You've done a good job.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Thank you very, very much.
That's cool.